On the night of our 20th wedding anniversary, I thought I knew everything about my wife. We had survived bills, sleepless nights, arguments, and silence. We had grown older together. But when she handed me a small envelope and whispered, "I need you to read this alone," I felt something shift inside my chest. I smiled, not knowing that letter would quietly destroy the man I thought I was. I sat there holding that letter for hours. I did not open it right away. Because part of me was afraid. Afraid that love can change. Afraid that time hides truths we are not ready to face. What my wife wrote that night would force me to question our marriage, my choices, and the meaning of loyalty itself. Hello and welcome. I am truly grateful that you are here today, spending a few moments of your time with me. Before we begin this story, I would love to know where you are watching from and how old you are. No matter where you are in the world, I hope this day brings you peace, warmth, and unexpected joy. If stories about love, marriage, and real life touch your heart, please stay with me until the end. If this story resonates with you at any moment, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps this channel grow and allows more stories like this to reach people who need them. And if you believe stories can heal, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. For 20 years, Mark and Angela appeared to have the kind of marriage people quietly admired. They were never the loud couple, never dramatic, never messy. Their life followed a steady rhythm of workdays, shared meals, and familiar routines. From the outside, it looked peaceful, predictable, safe. Friends often said they were lucky, not realizing that comfort can slowly replace closeness when no one is paying attention. Mark genuinely believed he was a good husband. He stayed loyal. He worked hard. He made sure there was food on the table and a roof over their heads. In his mind, love was proven through responsibility, through consistency, through never leaving. What he did not understand was that presence is not measured by proximity, but by attention, and attention was something he had gradually stopped offering. Angela learned early in their marriage how to adapt. She learned which thoughts were welcomed and which were better kept quiet. When conversations felt one-sided, she told herself it was temporary. When her feelings were dismissed unintentionally, she convinced herself that patience was maturity. Over time, she stopped explaining herself, not because she had nothing to say, but because she no longer believed her words would land. They shared a house filled with memories, photographs, and familiar furniture. Yet their emotional lives existed in separate rooms. There were no explosive fights to signal danger. No obvious betrayals, just a slow fading of curiosity about each other. Without realizing it, they had become partners in routine rather than participants in each other's inner worlds. The restaurant Angela chose was not extravagant. It was familiar, comfortable, and quietly elegant, the kind of place where memories linger longer than conversations. Soft music played in the background, and candlelight reflected gently off the table between them. Angela watched the flame flicker as Mark spoke, noticing how easily his words flowed while hers stayed trapped behind a practiced smile. Mark talked about work, about future plans, about how fast time seemed to move. He raised his glass and thanked Angela for being by his side all these years. His voice carried pride and certainty. To him, this dinner was a celebration of endurance and stability. He believed surviving together was the same as growing together, unaware that Angela experienced those same years very differently. Angela listened carefully, nodding at the right moments, laughing softly when expected. Inside, her chest felt tight. 20 years of thoughts pressed against her ribs, memories of moments she wanted to speak but chose silence instead. She realized this anniversary was not just a milestone, it was a crossroads. Either she spoke now or she would continue disappearing quietly. When dessert plates were cleared, Angela reached into her bag and took out a small envelope. It looked fragile in her hands, as if it carried more weight than paper should. She slid it across the table toward Mark and said his name softly. "Read this later. Alone." Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear of rejection, but from the courage it took to finally let herself be honest. That night, the house felt different to Mark. Not louder, not darker, just heavier. The kind of heaviness that settles quietly in the air when something important has been left unsaid. He placed the envelope on his desk with care, almost respectfully, as if it were fragile. The simple sight of his name written in Angela's handwriting made his chest tighten. He tried to distract himself with familiar routines. He changed his clothes slowly, folded them with unnecessary precision, and washed his face longer than usual. Every small action became a delay, a way to postpone the moment he knew was coming. Deep down, Mark sensed that once he opened that letter, there would be no way back to the comfort of not knowing. His mind filled with possibilities. Maybe Angela had written something sentimental, something meant to remind him of how far they had come. Maybe it was a love letter she had been saving for years. Yet beneath those hopeful thoughts lived a quiet fear. A fear that this letter carried words he was not prepared to face, truths he had avoided for too long. In the bedroom, Angela lay on her side facing the wall, giving him space without asking for it. That silence spoke louder than any argument. Mark realized how often he chose avoidance over curiosity, comfort over connection. Finally, with a slow breath, he returned to the desk, picked up the envelope and opened it, unaware that his understanding of their marriage was about to change forever. The first sentence stopped Mark completely. He read it once, then again, slower this time. "I have loved you for most of my life, but I have been lonely for longer than you realize." The word lonely echoed in his head, louder with every repetition. His chest tightened as he struggled to understand how love and loneliness could exist together for so many years without him noticing. A wave of confusion washed over him, followed by an instinctive urge to defend himself. He had been there. He had never left. He had worked hard, provided stability, and stayed loyal. How could Angela feel lonely when he shared a life with her every single day? The question lingered, uncomfortable and unresolved. As Mark continued reading, something unexpected unsettled him even more. Angela's words carried no bitterness. There was no anger, no accusation, no attempt to make him feel guilty. Instead, her tone was calm, careful, and deeply honest. It felt as though she had written the letter not to hurt him, but to finally tell the truth she had been holding inside for years. That realization struck Mark harder than anger ever could. Because anger could be dismissed or argued with, honesty could not. He felt exposed, as if the letter had quietly stripped away every excuse he had relied on to believe everything was fine. For the first time, Mark sensed that silence had protected him far more than it had ever protected Angela. Angela wrote about the choices she had made without ever announcing them. Opportunities she quietly declined. Dreams she slowly set aside. Paths she did not take, because she believed supporting Mark and their marriage was more important. She never called these sacrifices out loud because she thought that was simply what love required. Mark felt a deep ache form in his chest as he read about moments he barely remembered. Times when Angela had tried to share ideas or ambitions, only to be met with distraction or practical advice instead of encouragement. He realized now how often he had listened with his ears but not with his presence. The letter described nights when Angela lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, questioning whether wanting more connection made her ungrateful. She convinced herself that being strong meant being quiet, that being a good wife meant not asking for too much. Mark's throat tightened as he imagined her suffering silently inches away from him. Each paragraph felt heavier than the last. Not because Angela was blaming him, but because she wasn't. Her honesty revealed something far more painful. She had adapted to his absence instead of confronting it, and Mark understood that adaptation, over time, had slowly erased parts of her he never meant to lose. Then Mark reached a part of the letter that made his heart pause. Angela wrote clearly and firmly that she had never betrayed him. She had never loved another man. She had never crossed any lines. Her loyalty had never wavered, even when her loneliness felt unbearable. A brief sense of relief washed over Mark, followed immediately by a deeper, heavier emotion. Shame. Because her faithfulness did not absolve him. It exposed him. The absence she described was not physical. It was emotional. And that realization cut deeper than any imagined betrayal ever could. Angela explained that remaining faithful was not difficult. What was difficult was staying connected to someone who slowly stopped seeing her inner world. She stayed because she believed marriage was about endurance. about staying even when parts of herself felt unseen and unheard. Mark lowered the letter, his hands trembling slightly. He understood then that infidelity was not the greatest threat to a marriage. Neglect was, and he had participated in it without ever intending harm. The pain of that awareness settled deep inside him, heavy and unavoidable. Near the end of the letter, Mark expected a conclusion he had been dreading, a request for separation, a quiet goodbye, something final. Instead, Angela wrote something far simpler, yet far more frightening. She did not ask him to leave. She did not ask him to fix everything overnight. She asked him to see her, truly see her, not as a role, not as a wife who manages life smoothly, but as a woman who had been slowly fading. That single request unsettled Mark more than any demand could have. Seeing someone required effort. It required attention, curiosity, and vulnerability, things he had unknowingly withheld. He realized that for years he had loved Angela as a constant, not as a person still changing, still needing to be known. Angela explained that she was not writing to accuse him. She was writing because she was afraid of what would happen if she stayed silent any longer. She feared waking up one day and realizing she had disappeared completely inside a marriage that still existed in name only. Mark folded the letter slowly, feeling an unfamiliar weight in his chest. For the first time, he understood that love was not guaranteed by time spent together. It had to be renewed through awareness. And he was no longer sure whether he knew how to do that. The morning light crept quietly into the kitchen, illuminating a space that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Angela stood by the counter, holding a mug she had already forgotten to drink from. Mark entered the room slowly, carrying the weight of the night with him. Their eyes met briefly, then looked away. "Did you read it?" Angela asked softly, without accusation or expectation. Mark nodded, but his voice refused to come. Words felt insufficient. Everything he wanted to say felt either too late or too shallow compared to what she had written. Angela spoke calmly, explaining that she was not angry. Anger had passed years ago. What remained was exhaustion. The exhaustion of feeling unseen while standing right beside someone. She told him that invisibility was more painful than conflict. Mark listened, truly listened, without interrupting or defending himself. For the first time, he allowed himself to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. And in that silence, something shifted. Not healed, but acknowledged. Mark felt an overwhelming urge to promise change immediately, to say he would be better, more present, more attentive. The words formed quickly in his mind, ready to spill out. But something stopped him. He realized that promises had meaning only when they were built on understanding, not panic. He noticed how carefully Angela chose her words, how she no longer spoke in hopes of convincing him, but simply to explain herself. That realization hurt. It meant she had already let go of the expectation that he would automatically understand her. The space between them felt heavy but honest. There was no shouting, no tears, just clarity. Mark understood that silence had once kept the peace, but now it threatened the marriage itself. He finally spoke, not with solutions, but with acknowledgement. He admitted that he had been absent in ways he never recognized. Angela listened quietly, unsure whether relief or fear filled her chest more. Later that day, Mark found himself thinking about the early years of their marriage. He remembered Angela's curiosity, her energy, the way she talked about ideas and dreams with bright enthusiasm. He remembered how he used to ask questions simply because he wanted to know her better. Somewhere along the way, those questions disappeared. Conversations became transactional, necessary, efficient. He replaced curiosity with assumption, believing he already knew everything that mattered about her. Angela, meanwhile, remembered the man she married, the one who listened with full attention, the one who laughed easily, the one who made her feel chosen, not just included. She wondered quietly when that version of him had slipped away. Both of them realized something painful yet necessary. Love had not vanished suddenly. It had eroded slowly through neglect rather than malice, and understanding that truth opened the door to something they had not felt in years. Possibility. Mark spent most of that day in quiet reflection. For the first time in years, he stopped distracting himself with work, news, or routine. Instead, he sat with his thoughts, replaying moments he once considered insignificant. He began to see how often Angela had tried to connect, and how often he had unknowingly pulled away. He realized that stability had become his shield. As long as nothing was falling apart, he believed everything was fine. But now he understood something painful. A marriage can remain intact while the people inside it slowly break down emotionally. Providing had become his definition of love, paying bills, fixing things around the house, being physically present. What he had failed to understand was that Angela did not need another provider. She needed a partner who noticed her inner life. This awareness did not bring immediate solutions. It brought humility. And with humility came the understanding that he had much to learn about the woman he thought he already knew completely. That evening, Mark finally asked the question he had been avoiding. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Do you still love me?" He asked it without expectation, without defense, fully aware that the answer might hurt. Angela did not respond immediately. She looked down at her hands, gathering honesty instead of comfort. The pause felt endless to Mark. He realized how rarely he had allowed space for answers he might not like. "I want to," Angela finally said. Her words were gentle, but they cut deeply. Because wanting to love was not the same as loving without effort. It meant something had been damaged but not destroyed. Mark nodded slowly. That answer forced him to accept a difficult truth. Love does not survive on history alone. It survives on daily intention, and intention had been missing for far too long. They agreed to try again, but not in the way movies portray reconciliation. There were no dramatic promises or sudden changes, just an agreement to be honest, even when honesty felt uncomfortable. Mark committed to listening without interrupting, without fixing, without explaining himself. For the first time, his focus shifted from being right to being present. Angela approached this new beginning cautiously. She did not want to hope too quickly. She had learned that hope, when unsupported, could be painful. Still, something felt different. Not healed, not perfect, but real. And reality, for the first time in years, felt safer than silence. Angela began sharing stories she had never fully told before. Moments when she felt invisible. Times when she needed reassurance, but chose quiet instead. Each story carried weight, not accusation. Mark listened with full attention. He noticed how much courage it took for Angela to speak now, after years of holding everything inside. He resisted the urge to defend himself, understanding that defense would only rebuild distance. As she spoke, Mark saw the emotional cost of his absence. Not intentional neglect, but consistent unawareness. That realization humbled him deeply. Angela felt something unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time, she felt heard without having to simplify or soften her truth. Rebuilding did not feel romantic. Some days were awkward. Some conversations ended in silence. Healing exposed wounds before it soothed them. There were moments when old habits resurfaced, when Mark withdrew, when Angela hesitated to speak. Progress was uneven, but something had changed fundamentally. They no longer ignored the tension. They addressed it even when it was uncomfortable. Slowly, trust began to grow again. Not because everything was fixed, but because nothing was being hidden. Mark began to understand marriage differently. Not as something you maintain, but something you participate in fully. He learned that love is not proven through endurance alone, but through attention and curiosity that never stop evolving. Angela noticed the change. Small gestures, eye contact, questions that showed genuine interest. These moments did not erase the past, but they reshaped the future. The letter became more than words on paper. It became a turning point. A moment of truth that interrupted years of quiet disconnection. Mark understood now that honesty, though painful, had saved them from a much quieter ending. Angela never intended to hurt him. She intended to survive emotionally, whether together or alone. Choosing honesty was the bravest thing she had ever done. Mark often thought about how many couples lived the same way they once did. Stable on the outside, silent on the inside. He hoped their story would remind others not to wait for a breaking point to speak. Love requires maintenance, but more importantly, it requires presence. Silence may feel peaceful, but it can slowly erase connection. Mark still keeps the letter in a drawer by his bed. He reads it sometimes, not with pain, but with gratitude. It reminds him of who Angela is beyond her role as a wife. It reminds him of who he almost became without realizing it. Most importantly, it reminds him to keep listening. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Angela gave Mark a letter. That letter did not end their marriage, it revealed it. And in doing so, it gave their love a second life. As this story comes to a close, remember that love does not always break loudly. Sometimes it fades quietly, hidden behind routines and unspoken words. If this story reminded you of someone, or of a moment you have been avoiding, take that feeling seriously. If you believe stories like this matter, you are welcome to like this video, share your thoughts below, and stay with us by subscribing for more real stories about love, marriage, and the fragile beauty of human connection.